Super. We are at the top of the hour, and let's start it. I recommend and always believe that it is for the people that join on time that we're going to start. Obviously, yeah, you're here, so you are hearing all this, and I think that is important. So, over the last half year, we worked a lot with B2B and trying to simplify the way we are working with it, make it easier and accessible. And I think we've done a lot, we've learned a lot, and this is the things that we will be sharing today. If you want to go to the next one. So the team here, the agenda, we want to look at, no, just skip this one, I guess. I guess our focus for today is first we'll cover a little about our topic, then we will show a little more about what we can actually do and some of the recommendations that we see. So my name is Daniel Gervis, I'm the founder of Figaf, and today I have two B2B experts that have worked extensively on improving these capabilities. So Kishore and Emil, just hi.
Hello.
Just cool. Okay. Next, I guess. Yeah. So at Figaf, our mission is to make it easier for SAP developers to build integration that actually works, that simplifies the way you're working with your SAP integration. We've done a lot in this, and yeah, we are SAP certified and recommended as a part of the migration journey. And this is much in line with this, trying to take what SAP have done and add a lot of simplifications on top of this. So next. And now I'll hand over to Kishore that worked on this and want to share a little about what we have actually seen when using this in real world.
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. So yeah, this is something we talked about in the previous webinar also. That's where we started the journey with a medical healthcare company who has the B2B. They have used it on SAP PO with the B2B add-ons, and then they have this X12 Edifact over S2 and SFTP communication. So the project is pretty straightforward. Like they want to do an as-it-is migration, lift and shift, and that's where we tried to help them. And then we have done a small POC migrating a single vendor. And if I have to go a little deeper into what they have in their landscape, like mappings, which is using the functional profiles as a lookup, and B2B function libraries with an extended receiver determination, and then TPM agreements. And then they have all sort of custom UDFs like value, single value, context, as well as the queue functions. So right now, the scope, what we have taken is to migrate 14 partners with around 72 documents. And this contains all types of documents like inbound, outbound, with functional acknowledgement, etc. And then the list is given here. So they have mainly the message mappings with custom function libraries, custom UDFs, and then XSLTs and XSLTs with Java code in it, reference to that. So we have used Figaf to primarily migrate these things. And of course, the communication methods what we used is IDOC, EDI, and XML and HTML. So next slide, Amy. So the approach what we have taken is use the Figaf migration tool combined with the Groovy, and then testing and transport using the DevOps tool. So the migration is pretty straightforward, at least from what we have seen from the interface perspective using the Figaf tool, because we have something called B2B profile, which we have already mentioned in the previous webinar, that will simplify things for the trading partner agreements, which will create a process direct, and then we will use directly in the agreement for that. And then the simplification comes when we actually need to test the actual interface. That is where we will record using the PI system, where customer sends the messages and then they are successful, and then we will extract the payloads from different stages. What we expect, like you can extract payload, the original payload of what a raw file received, and also an intermediate form if required. And then once the test case is done, with few clicks, we'll migrate it to the CPI iFlow and then run it. And once we run it, the real migration effort is actually visible here. How different is my output coming from CPI when it is compared against PI mapping? So that is where the integration consultant job is to adjust the mapping, where we have done very minimal things, proving that the tool works, and then we'll also explain why those minimal things have happened. And then they have used the virtual tenant concept, what is unique to Figaf, which will be helpful that you don't need to get an additional testing tenant or quality tenant, but still you can actually do the scenario testing as if it is your quality tenant. Next slide, Amy. Yes. When it comes to the learnings from the B2B on integration suite, this list is little small, but we try to confine it to a single slide. When we use the Figaf migration tools, the migration is instantaneous most of the cases, because function libraries and standard libraries and XSLTs and message mappings, they are pretty much straightforward, lift and shift using Figaf. But the unit testing is actually where it comes. The integration consultant needs to find the differences using the Figaf testing tool, and then adjust, which has actually consumed time. And then when it comes to the full list of documents, on average, it is a day per document. I mean, there are some cases where I mentioned like XSLT with Java archives included in it. So there it took some time, because that's not possible with Figaf or any other migration tool right now. But on average, I would say we've spent close to a day in this process. And
Towards
once,
the end of the process, right?
yeah, towards the end of, yes, I mean, that's my next statement, because
Okay.
once the above things are done, these interfaces are actually production ready. The comment I got from the customer is that these mappings are spotless compared to PI when it's comparing the payload output. So that's actually a really good appreciation for Figaf, how it can help you with the expedition of the migration process. And when it comes to integration suite, monitoring is improved. You can see B2B related communication, functional acknowledgement, and those payloads, everything at one place. But how can you keep a long-term archive, and how you keep it simple? That's actually a question. And then the agreements also you can activate, deactivate with one click, which is helpful for us, because when we are using the virtual tenant, we have to create the trading partner agreement side by side, and then shifting from one environment to other environment, it is pretty straightforward. And then certificate management is still a challenge here, because there are a number of places we have to put these certificates, and then how you monitor the expiry and how you roll in automatically, that's still not really to the best. And then with the identifier concept introduced and grouping of the identifiers, there are also some open ends which SAP needs to fix it, because let's say if you have a company and subsidiaries, then there are not straight away things to map these identifiers. And then of course the systems as well. And as we mentioned earlier, when we moved from Seaburger to B2B, the XSTs are different. Even though SAP has built these XSTs themselves, the XSTs from PI to integration suite, they are not exactly the same. So there are some things like the renaming of the structures and tables like L is replaced with G, something like that, which of course we have actually took the pain for the customers, and then we have explored the options, and then now we can actually support that as well, like converting PI XSTs XMLs to CPI based XSTs XMLs. So that is also possible using Figaf.
Sorry,
And then
Kishore, can I just add a comment? Because
yeah.
just I think something maybe everybody can appreciate or maybe even laugh about is that we found, for example, an error in the orders, EDIFACT orders 96A. I guess everybody has been in touch with that at some point. And we found actually that the standard SAP EDI content from the from the TPM is incorrect and generates an incorrect XSD, which is then rejected in the integration suite. And it's just an example of like even the most core interfaces suddenly has a wrong XSD. So there can be these differences that we found. Sorry, that was it.
Yes. Yeah. And then the standard TPM flows like what you get it in the version 2, and now I think this 2.6.1 which is released, but we found multiple bugs in it, like IDOC custom segments, IDOC segments counter that is not working correctly. There are other issues also, but as we see, OSs are constantly being updated from SAP with some bug fixes. And then the most important thing is when you have a lot of partners to onboard, the transport of the TPM artifacts is really a giant pain in the back, because right now it won't support the mix transporting. And then if you are using the manual export import, then there is a chance it will overwrite your already changed pre-existing production configurations. So there is a lot of improvement needs to be done. But of course, we from Figaf are also working on it to actually see how we can help customers with the creating of TPM artifacts cleanly, and then not going through the laborious process of creating each identifier, each communication type, communication channel, and identifiers. Next slide, please.
I think just one more comment. I guess one of the things we're also seeing that even when you have raised these OSS, SAP have actually updated this TPM standard packages. So it is not a dead thing. It is actually something that is being actively developed, and that is obviously also credit for SAP to continuously evolve this scenario.
Yeah.
Cool. Sorry.
Yes. Thanks, Daniel. Yeah. So now with the Figaf, the learnings, what we have, definitely it is a one-click migration whenever these things are of the template. But if there are some issues, some complex things like XSLT combined with Java, those things can take time. But otherwise, the migration is instantaneous. But as I mentioned earlier, also testing and adjustment of the interface to suit the PI output is actually taking time. But we still recommend customers to go through the Max instead of the PI as it is migration. But I think that will be covered by my colleague Emil afterwards. And then once the migration is done, as I mentioned, the comment from customer that these interfaces are production ready. I mean, like we have done this scenario testing, but it's a placeholder to ensure that we didn't break anything. And then the Groovy XSLT tool is actually making the UDF migration and maintenance much easier. We've also used the automated bot from Figaf, OpenAI, to actually generate these XSLTs wherever we have to adjust some namespaces, things like that. Of course, we have some challenges experienced during this thing, but they are coming as a features in the Figaf roadmap, because we want to improvise based on our experience, and we don't want to leave any holes in the way towards satisfaction journey for the customers using Figaf. The customers' involvement, as far as I see during the project, is primarily twofold. One is actually to trigger the test cases in the PI system. That will be helpful for us to record because we don't know their scenarios. at least how to trigger. They know them very much, and then that's where we have used their help. And then of course for scenario testing, and then approval for the transport. So these are the primary things, and roughly again it is an average for the total project is a half a day per document. And when it comes to the integration consultant involvement, it is to migrate and to adjust the IPO, basically making sure that this is as it was in PI. And then once it is having the proper test case from PI with the one-click migration, and then ensuring that it follows the output. And of course, when it comes to CPI, the EDI XML to EDI converter is also playing a different role, which is not what is there in the PI system, because the XSTs are different. That is also something we have taken care in the Figaf tool. And then transport and go live, that is where this is involved, and it is average and a day per document. It is towards the end of the project for the go live. So this is the overall experience, and then very soon, hopefully, we'll be completing the full and final vendor list, and then we expect to actually publicize also in a podcast with the customer. With that, I think I'll hand over to Emil for governance as well as what customers are looking for.
Yeah, I think I just run a poll about just want to have a little understanding of where you are and what's the size of your B2B landscape, so at least we can tailor some of this towards it. Should probably have used it a little earlier. But Emil, continue.
Yes. So thank you. So based on all these experiences, and then also analysis of like how is this new TPM feature, which is not so new but is starting to look more and more promising, how is that working, and what then do we need it to work for? Now we have here, it's a little bit corny statement maybe, but you can say some argue maybe there's no business case. Like, what are we gaining? What's I guess maybe the real direct question to SAP is, what's wrong with PI? That worked, right? So, and then also there is this focus on maybe being a little interested in saying we want to keep the existing solution, right? It works in PI, we're kind of happy with that, so we just want that, please. And that also puts a focus on migrating a lot of the as-is solution, and maybe especially the mapping programs. And you can see it, like if you have 1,000 mapping programs, that's a lot of money invested into that and a lot of effort. And you say like, start over? No, thank you. So it's just to see that this is also where they're coming from. So no matter what SAP is now providing, this is the reality they're coming from. And then of course, everybody appreciates that there is a need for test. Like if we are completely switching out the engine of the car, we have to test if it still drives, right? Like, is it still working? So this is where we say, this is where Figaf can help you deliver precisely on these topics. So first, some preparations though. And this is where we say, like, if you're going to start this process, if it's new to you, it's also important to know precisely where you're coming from. It's not enough to just say we have PI and we like it. So what is known, and we come here saying like, can you find the right scope and get that? Because that is important for getting started correctly. And here the key word is really starting correctly. So do you know the correct number of active B2B agreements? And for that, that's also just a test to know, like, do you have a definition of an agreement? Like, what is it? How do you define an agreement? Because some might say, well, we have our EDI separators. That's basically our flow end to end, or whatever. It might be a spreadsheet that you have somewhere, or it's the TPM system. But then it's like, okay, you have a list of your agreements, but then are they active? Because we can also see some cases where there's just maybe half of the agreements was left over from a previous migration and they're not active. So again, can you get the scope right? Can you then list also the mappings and what is used and where it's used? And do you know exactly the scope of the EDI formats and adapters in scope? Now, why this is important, of course, is that then you can plan more optimal, right? And say like, exactly what are we going to start by migrating, the quick wins or whatever, and then also how are we going to migrate it? Because there can be a difference. And just to give you a quick example, you say like, well, we have this super simple mapping, so that's the first one we're going to migrate into a message mapping in CPI, but the argument could actually be, maybe that's precisely the mapping you should migrate into a Mac instead. So it's more like to have these discussions. What is used in your landscape? Are you using TPM, or are you using EDI content control keys, the EDI separator? Is it a mix? And how are they used? And the next is like, how are they used? Is it uniformly, or is it a mixed bag saying like, oh, we have some XML formats and they're kind of going all around everything or whatever. It's just, but it's still B2B. All that needs to be sort of given an overview of, and then find out if you are aligned with SAP best practices, or is there some kind of workarounds, and as we call here, flexible usage. For example, TPM, maybe you say TPM, well, that's just for documentation. We don't really use it for runtime, for example. And this will give us some idea also of like, and give you an idea, where are you starting out? Because, and this, I will not go through this, don't worry, but it's just to highlight that there are significant differences in the B2B when you're coming from PO to integration suite. First of all, we could just say that the PI wasn't perfect. That was one thing. There were gaps. There were functionalities not there. Functionalities that are now in the integration suite. So that's sort of the good news. The bad news is that maybe we don't really know how to deal with it, because suddenly we have a TPM that's working correctly. And that can almost be a little bit a challenge for a lot of us, I think, to start getting into, because and I would just take the three highlighted I have here, is that because now the B2B processes are 100% driven by TPM. It's almost like there's no alternative. You either use TPM and you use it correctly, not half, not a little bit adjusted or whatever, or you don't use it at all, would almost be at least our recommendation. And there are some workarounds where they said, oh, there's these pipeline setups and you use just the partner directory, completely set it up manually. We would not recommend going that way, but it's either like, if you go with the TPM, you basically also have to commit to saying like, then we're going to use it correctly and we're going to implement it the way it should be. SAP best practice was a term that was very popular when I started out. It's not used as much anymore, but it's definitely, in this case, I think it's best practice, and standard SAP is going to be a lot more in focus. Which also comes back to then this one, messages must be valid and match TPM agreements. And here everybody would say, oh yes, of course. But it's like, we know in PI that was often, could happen often anyways, not the case. And there were workarounds. We could work around it. I've noted, I've been building these things for 20 years. There are workarounds, but that gotta stop. So there's maybe a little bit of painful communications between partners here, because it's like, if you are receiving crap, you got to clean that up first. And then there are still some limitations, just to say that again, when it comes to scoping your project, look at where to start and what to start with, because there are some limitations in technologies and formats, for example. So there could be some problems with some older VDA formats or some adapters like OFTP, where we're still saying like, here you need a very custom built solutions. Nothing is impossible, but it's definitely going to be a little more tricky because we don't have an out of the box solution. Okay, it took a little longer anyways. Mix max and message mappings. Yes, I don't know what the general consensus is, but when I talk to people, they're not big fans of max, and I think it's more because like, oh, it's a new technology, XXLT is working, how to use it. It can only work with this and TPM and all that. But I gotta say, I'm winning. They're winning me over, because the more I work with it, the better I think it is. And also talking with SAP, they stated, I asked them directly, and they say, this is our best practice. It is what we recommended. It is what we're going to do. So there's no way around it. So even though you say, well, we're just going to migrate a bunch of message mappings, fair enough, but you have to consider max, because that is the future. It's how it should be done. It's also the only way you can really, truly version control your mappings. Because the other thing is that there you can only version control your iFlows, but there can be a lot of weird things going on in there, and you don't even know what your mapping is or how it has changed. Whereas with the Max, you actually have solid versioning control, and that alone, I think, is just going to be. Imagine again when you have hundreds or thousands of mappings or agreements. How are you going to control it and be sure that you have everything under control? So it's just to say, Mac is something that has to be considered, but we understand and appreciate that message mappings are also still going to be needed, since it is part of legacy. So
I guess there's a question here on that. Message mappings to Mac, yes, that is never going to happen. It's two different technologies. Yeah. I've obviously considered what we could do, and it's like, yeah, not really going to happen.
No, it's like it is a re-implementation. You have to start over basically with the Mac, and that is of course a challenge. But again, we can help simplify that and even simplify the switch to Mac. Not migrating a message mapping to Mac, but how to make the switch. I will show some of that also. Figaf products, yes. So we are definitely front runners here in envisioning how to then, yeah, create this evolution of integration systems. Basically, it's how you can handle all of these B2B concepts and objects that we're talking about. And I think actually I would rather go into the first summary and then demo to show you what that means precisely. Just highlight again, Mac is SAP best practice and should be embraced. And when I say embraced, it doesn't mean that you have to use them, but you have to think about that it will be part of your architecture, that it shouldn't be something that you say, well, never mind. It has to be somehow part of your architecture so you can move in that direction. That is our recommendation, and also SAP's. Still, customers do prefer as-is migration when possible, and that's fair enough. So we have then a tool here for make sure that you can reuse as much of your mappings as possible. And then you have a testing tool that will actually make sure that you deliver and that you have created a robust solution that matches. And that should accelerate your whole project. So, demo. I would like to start with Figaf. So, you know the tool, I hope, or not. You can again just deploy it on your test tenant or your development tenant or whatever, and have a look and test for free a little bit of some of the functionalities. And there are a lot, as you can see here. Those familiar with it would notice that there's a new one, and this is just part of our latest release, where we now also have a dedicated B2B menu. So that I will go into a lot. But before that, I'll just say, what are we coming from? In this case, what we've been working on, we will assume that we are coming from a TPM setup. Somebody has been using TPM here and have everything defined. And we have then, need to refresh, a company here. And as you know, we have then our company, Testos Mucho. And as you can see, they're a little bit split over different regions and doing different business with different customers. That we can also see we have a bunch of customers coming from all over the place. So this company also has a bunch of agreements in place. In our system landscape, we now have 40 agreements, so it's not a big company, but we are growing. And if we just look at the, well, that's for sales, but if we look at the orders, and let's just look at the inbound orders, and let's just look at the X12. So you can see there's a bunch of X12 coming from a different bunch of customers. This we want to migrate. We also, in the same process, are changing name of our company. So if we go to our integration suite, we'll just check I'm up to date. No. Then we have a new company, Alora. Alora Solution Group, parent company based in Denmark. Now, this is again where to get the scope from the beginning is very important. For example, how are you going to deal with multiple company codes, or even maybe multiple sales organization or purchase organizations? I mean, is that all going to be handled within one parent company, or are you going to use subsidiaries? And it's important to know that before you begin. So it's again part of that plan of saying what are we doing, and here in this case we then say we have then created 3 subsidiaries and say yes, this is what we're also going to work with. We already have a bunch of partners, and we then say we know how to communicate them via our agreement template. Before I go into that, let's talk templates. So templates. This is the keystone, a cornerstone, I would say, where to begin your journey. No, sorry. And what I meant was, before I want to start this, I want to talk mix and max. So you will need mix There's no doubt about it. Like, there's no way you can make anything work here without mix. So that's an absolute given. And here again, we come into the naming convention, and this is where there can be many different opinions, way of go. I can just tell you that the naming convention we've come up with, it's not something random or anything. There's a lot of analysis that's gone into this, and there's a reason for every aspect of it. And what you can see here is that it's basically taking all the properties of the MIC. And here the argument can, of course, be why put all the properties in the naming? There is actually a good reason, and that is the max. Once you start creating the max, you just select the mix, and then SAP provides you with a naming. And that naming will then match exactly your two different mix. Which again, instead of becoming creative and say, well, we do a little of this, little of that, or whatever, you just say you have your mappings per MIC, and there you create your base maps, max. Then you can start creating overlays that might then say be partner specific or something and like this. Now, this is, I don't want to turn this into a MIC-MAC tutorial or anything, but it's just to say that's a good reason for why to think a lot about how you name your mix and your max, and then make sure that they are all like uniformly named, so you don't have 8 different versions of your inbound X12 orders 850, right? But just say we have one global, and then we might have a partner specific one if needed. So that's just to say that that's where basically I would say you start by creating your mix. And then when you have your scope of, for example, the agreements that you are going to need from that we know from our PO system, and right now we know over here that we're definitely going to need some X12 orders templates. Make sure that those are also created here as mix and as max. And then you say, well, max, we're not going to use max. No, but again, you can just create it as an empty shell. And there's a reason for that. Again, I will get into later, but just create it as an empty shell. Just create it and then say, now I have it. And that's why you see all of these lovely max here ready to go. There's not much work put into them. We said we're going to do that later, just like maybe many of you will do. But that means then we can start into the templates. Now here we've come up with a naming convention, which is basically to say we will take the parent company or subsidiary, and I'm just going to sort by name here. So you can see here we have, for example, all of our parent companies. We know it's B2B. We get all the inbound first. You can see we have over 70 templates. And this is just because you see we take for every single message, almost, then we take we say then is it the core process, is it global or logistics, for example, and then what is the business subject? Is it an application advice? And then you see the type system. Remember, everybody, that's the new word. We used to call it formats, but now it is called type systems, whether it's EDIFACT or X12 or custom messages or whatever, it could be anything else. So you can see it's listed here with the global ones first, logistics, procurement, and then sales. Now you can use different naming convention here. And this is something that we get from just saying here, you can see just from basically a logic setup of saying like, okay, this is a concatenate of these 4 fields, right? 5. And here you could, of course, set up your own thing. The point really here is just have a concept in place where you organize these things. And you might say we want to use a different type of core process terminology for specifying this or whatever. But the key thing here to remember is that we make it business object specific. And this is again a decision, and you can go back and forth on it, but it's just important that there is a governance and a plan for saying like, how are we going to manage our templates? Do we want to have, for example, 5 different message types inside a template? Or do we say we only want one? Or we only want one format at least? Or do we want different processes, different business objects? In this case, we say it's going to be a one-to-one, because personally, I think it's just too ambitious to think that you can define standard processes that you can just select from for depending on partner to partner. In this case, you keep it very clean, but that doesn't mean that there's only one in each of these. Let's see, we have some examples here. Up here, you see most of them are just created empty for now, but it's just to say, just create your template to begin with, excuse me, and then you can have your scenarios inside. Our scenarios, as we split it, is saying like, well, we know this is a sales order, and we know it's X12. So that means that we have our different versions of X12 in here, and we have the different potential receivers in here. It could go to an IDOC, it could also go to a SOAP enterprise service. So this is what we've already set up. So basically, we would say there's nothing that hinders you from doing this today. To say that you don't even need Figaf for this, right? You can just say, we go through the list here, we know what we need, sorry. And then we create our mix, our max, we have our companies, and we create our templates. And then you are this far. The next step is then your partners. Now, creating your partners, that can be a little bit of a challenge. You see, we have a bunch of partners here. And this is where I then wanted to show you then what's happening in the Figaf tool. There's a new menu down here, and there's, for example, you can then view your partners. And you can see here the different partners. What we have added, a new feature that's coming is
It's already so
it's already released, yes.
Released yesterday, and I just need to write about it, so it should come.
Go get it, everybody. So so here you have the possibility to create a partner, and there is certain benefits in that I would like to show you. So let's go to a practical thing. Who should we pick?
You have like
Canada.
Not too much time. You have like
okay.
10, 15 minutes, something like that.
Okay, so we go quick. So now it's just going to go. So I'm going to say, we can see we're doing business with Costco again. So we say Costco, and now we want to say we want to migrate Costco. I want to create a partner. I know the name already. Our naming convention would be that we take the name, underscore it with the country code in ISO format. You add this, and you see these are the mandatory. You could basically say, then we say, what type of system is it? This is where you can then create different type of systems, where you say, the most important thing is to indicate whether it's on-premise or cloud. And then there's a bunch of standard applications to pick from. We're just going to make this a cloud system. Then we say, we know we're going to deal with X12. We already know also the formats we're going to do it in, that it's 5010. We then say we're going to deal with it as an AS2, an AS2. Then we can go to our partner and say, for this partner, and we can see, do we have an SAP identifier? There's an SAP identifier here, where we can see some inbound and outbound for SAP. So that's going to be our SAP identifier. Is there a GLN code? Again, we just go over here. You can prepare this in a spreadsheet, but you can also say, if you have it already, then you say your migration process is basically just aligned with your TPM system. Is there a DUNS number? Yes, there's a DUNS number. And then the good old set. We know a lot of them like it, so we're just going to, yes, and we have a set. And we put that in. And that's basically it. You can put a little extra if you want, but you can also just say, let's go. It's then been created, and we see it on the list. Now you can go to your integration suite, but you can also just go directly via the link here. And we said it was Costco Canada. So you just click on the link directly from Figaf. It'll take you to the integration suite and directly to the partner, the newly created partner. Now, one of the benefits, again, you say, well, why don't I just do this here? And this is where the benefit comes. I can show you. First of all, you got all the identifiers created. They're following a naming convention that we, of course, have defined, but at least that means that whenever you're creating the partners, they all follow the same naming convention. We see a lot where it's suddenly the alias and identification is the same and whatever. Now you're following a naming convention where the alias will tell you what type it is and precisely which partner it is for. And then you can see you have these identifiers ready to use. But what's even better, you have your systems ready. This is also us preparing for the transport feature. That's it's a little teaser here, but something we're also working on is to say, how are we actually going to move this? And in order to move this, you're going to need your 3-layer transports set up at least. And here, the benefit is, again, your channels are already created. You already have your generic sender and receiver. You can, of course, add more, whatever, but now they're all been prepared, and they've been prepared for all systems. They're already there, ready to configure, and you can just prepare it and release it and transport it as you want. So all of this is set up. There's a dummy here. I'm just going to activate this for the AS2, but that you can also maintain and set up whatever you want. But basically, this partner is ready to go. So let's go. Which means that then we go here and say, well, we know what we want to do. Let's just check. I know we have the orders. So now we say, well, we want to create now an agreement. And we go search for our template. Well, we knew it was an order. We knew it was an AS. We know we're doing business with Denmark. The order, the agreement we see down here is with Testos Mutuos Denmark. So we say we want to do business It's an inbound sales order for Denmark. This is it. You can see there's a template created for each subsidiaries. I'd like to show you, but that is necessary. The first thing when you create a template is you have to select either whether it's a company or which subsidiary. So you cannot reuse templates across subsidiaries. You have to then define one for each. Then you can see we have what we have available, but we then say what we're going to do is to take this one, the 55010, and then we say this is for our new partner, Costco. I would just recommend copying this and open draft. So now we went from template to an actual agreement. I would then, in our naming convention, recommend that we then add the short name of the customer to this here. And then you can basically just start and say, well, this is our development system. Again, I can tell you, I mean, I think for a partner, I spent over an hour creating a partner manually when creating all these systems and the identifiers and everything. It's really tedious job. You see now it took 30 seconds. So you have everything here ready to select. And we know here this version, then the identifiers, we say then in our system, the new Aloha solution is called this. In the other partner, we can see how are we communicating with them today. We can see our Danish company is using a DUNS code. So we are using DUNS. For the partner, it was a GLN code. So we picked the GLN code. And in our receiver system, it was this SAP. Again, the identifiers are already in place, and they're fairly easy to read and understand thanks to the naming convention. We hope here, right? What to pick. So that means that now you have defined the core elements of your agreement. Now, in the agreement, by default, it will have defined your MAC. So this is already in there. The benefit of that is also that now you get your mix assigned immediately, automatically as well. So basically all you have to do is, again, you can now create, let's just take also acknowledgements, and we can also set our IDOC receiver. So the channels are now being assigned, and we can then save it and activate that. And finished. And that's it. We can bill the customer a full day and go home, right? No, then there's a little bit more, because now we say, yes, this was the MAC, but that MAC we don't want to use. We want to use our migrated mapping. And we then say, okay, and this is where then we have to go back to Figaf. And this is where then it's interesting to look at the PI to CPI migration. Let's just synchronize our agreements. This synchronization is something you can, of course, schedule and set up to run automatically every evening or something. So you make sure that everything you have in your Figaf tool is updated. But as you can see, it's also easy to do manually. So let's say, do we have some test cases? This is then, we know that we want to deal with the 850, and I see here this, I know that this is the ICO that we want to migrate. And then we can see, do we have any test cases? And we can see already today, we have test cases prepared. We did Costco Canada, I believe, and we can see there's a test case, there's something is running. And already now, you could just migrate this test case to CPI. And let me just copy that name again for something and say, I want to create a new test case. And now should be able to find one here. And again, this is now fairly easy because now we can just, because of our naming, search quickly and find our agreement and say, this is our agreement, and select that. And we have now migrated our test case and we can run it. So now basically you've already migrated to integration suite, and we can see here, Costco Canada is talking to a lower solution. And what was there? Some 50 orders, and they're just pounding in here. And that all looks good. And you can go to the monitor and you can see everything. And there's our iDoc, and there's, oh, no, sorry, that's the iDoc, yes. In the center, there's our X12. So basically, migration finished. But again, if we then look here, we could then go and look at the test results, and they might be extremely different because the mapping was very different. And then we said, yeah, no, we are not ready for that. Well, we could start adjusting our mapping now, our MAC, and say, let's go that way. But maybe we say, no, we're going to do the actual migration. We go back to the migration tool, we pick this, and then we say, let's pick our migration object. Again, we go find the flow. It's the 5010. It's this version, not that one. It's Testos Muchos. Yeah. And we then say, where should we put this stuff? And this is where we then also recommend that we simply create a package for every single template. So again, this is not just because it's strictly necessary. It's also because then you have alignment. You have a way of checking, are you following governance or are you not following governance? What is your governance? We have templates, they are named like this. Then we have packages, they're named identical, which then makes it a lot easier to then say, okay, then when I want to find my order in AS format, I can then see, okay, I have it now for parent company Denmark, and I have it, the technical names is without spaces. And then you have it also for US. Now we want to pick this one where we say, this is for the one we want. And then I would recommend that you take again also the agreement name, and you reuse that. And just again, a little teaser, we are working towards a solution where all of this will be automatically generated, where you don't have to do these copy pastes and whatever, where everything will be managed automatically. But for now, we still have to do this, where we then say, we also want to create now a new main flow. Again, in naming convention, we would like to use, I'll show you why quickly. And then we say, this is going to be moved as a B2B scenario. We check. Always have to check, even if you check change the smallest thing, you have to do a check again, because we want to make sure is everything correct and ready to work. Close. Now you can see for this flow, we actually have a lot of partners. Here it is. And by default, it will just pick the first one. So we say that's not the one we're interested in, but we can see we also have a lot of mappings down here. And we then want to find our Canada Costco. Now, in this case, Canada Costco was a little bit special because that actually uses a global mapping. So we saw that there was an agreement of both the US and Canada. So here's a global mapping. So we say, okay, this is the one we want to migrate. So we basically select that and do another check. It checks again. And now you can then see in the second check, it is now checking for the global Costco mapping. How is this going to work? Then you get the list down here. All of these objects will somehow is going to be used in it. And we can see that there's a lot of user-defined functional libraries, a lot of functional libraries being used here. We would recommend always just reuse everything except the SAP standard. Most prefer to say we will want to have our SAP standard one place, and then you can use the migrated CPI functional libraries that SAP has then from SAP functionality. So that we select for those. They're easy to spot from the shared artifact here. There you can see the component, and we have different versions, but I just want to make sure we could pick the correct one. There's some test here. There. So now it all looks nice. Again, I have changed my migration, so I need to do a new check or my preparation. So again, it just checks again and makes sure that everything looks good.
And this is the standard way we're also migrating everything else. So it's just one way of dealing with the migration, whether it's B2B or TPM that you're working with these things.
Yeah. So they're finished. There is the option of deploy immediately, but we know actually also in this case, we want to do some adjustment. Just note here again that there's a link here. You see immediately the migrated iFlow. So you can go directly to the iFlow, click, and then you're in the iFlow. Here, there's a couple of things we want to change. This is also something we're working on. You see there's a proposal to a UL, but we would recommend that you basically follow the same naming as the flow. And I'll just adjust it quickly here. And then we say this was the main flow. Now, nothing's perfect. There can be some little problems. We have a minor bug that we are looking into, but we can see here that in this one, let me just show, so for full transparency, that there is a problem with an assignment of one of the SAP functional libraries. We don't really know why that's happening because it is assigned and everything, and it's there. So we just assigned it once again, but this is something we are looking into. So we just take the same. You can see here is our custom functional libraries. Here's the global one, and we then take just the node one again and assign that one. And now we see everything is fine. So we deploy this one and say then we have adjusted process direct URL, and we have added functional library node. We save that, and now we deploy. Now I gotta adjust my agreement. Now we know the name here, and we're like, where was it? But let's say we did this 2 weeks later. Then we say, which agreement was it? Just to sorry, I'll just synchronize now that we've changed the flow.
So Figaf keeps a lot of copies of your integrations and TPMs and stuff like that, and that's why we synchronize.
Yeah. So if we go back to the B2B here, then we see we have our partners, but now you also see we also have our scenarios. Now here we can now see already we have then our new Costco. So again, from here, when we now say, well, we're going to use a custom flow, right? What you see here in the agreements, and sure, let me just show you in an overview first also. When you look at all these agreements, and again, imagine when you have 1,000 of these or 2,000 of these, you might say like, who am I doing business with? Well, maybe you want to say like, how much am I doing with Amazon? Okay, this is the business I'm doing with Amazon, in and outbound. That's nice. And you can see the receiver here. I'm then saying, well, how much is Germany dealing with? So you can very quickly get an overview of here, like who's doing business with who and how much. And you can then go directly to your flows or agreements from here directly. Now, when you look here also, when you look here also, you might also say, who of these are using Max and who are using custom mappings, for example. And that's what you see out here. I've already sorted. There you see main flows. That is, if you have built a custom main flow, then you can see here it's assigned. And if there's a post flow or pre-flow, and then you can see all the rest is using Max. And you can jump directly from here. So if you have a custom flow or custom mapping, you don't have to remember, where did I put it? Where was it? You just go over here and you can see immediately, here it is. And then there's a link and you can say, this is the one I want. Now, in this case, we then say, I'm sorry, I did something wrong. It's jumped. So in this case, we say we want to take our Costco. We want to go to the agreement. Now we say we want to use a custom mapping. And I save that now, so I have my flow here. I'm going to edit this. And then we're going to go in here and say, well, in this case, there's a custom. This is the URL. And all of this, we're also working towards automating. So basically, when you do the migration, if you do this, then all of this should be done magic. This is what we're aiming towards. But just to show you also, the manual steps are not that bad. That you put this in, and just because I'm a freak for governance, I like to rename this as then a custom integration flow. So we have that, we save that, and we update our agreement. Now we have migrated our mapping. We can go back here. We can then say in our overview, maybe just first synchronize our our TPM, because again now we added a function flow, a custom flow. And now we can go to our test, migrated test scenarios, which we then say, basically, we've already set that up. So for our test suite, we have our new one for Costco Canada. And then we say, well, we did a test on the Mac, but let's just run a new one. Again, over here. I'll see again, Costco Canada going through, but now we're using our custom mapping. Now we're using our migrated mapping, which will then give us some results. Let's see, are we finished? And we then go to our results here. And there's still errors, but this is where, just to show you, now, of course, there's some, we can see the discrepancies. There's nothing wrong in the payload. But up here, we can see, and this is our input. This is where there was some kind of user-defined function or some like functional library function that was doing some kind of lookup. And whenever you had a lookup in TPM or value mapping lookup or whatever, we have basically then say, we add this here. So you can see very clearly, here's a problem. Here's something you got to deal with. And this is what Kishore told you about. This is the mapping adjustments you now have to start on and work on. But you can see a lot of them you can ignore and say, well, we don't care about this one. That doesn't matter. Create date or time. That, of course, is okay. And okay, there's the standard. It says now it's an X12. It's coming from an X12. That's again fine. You know, that's not a problem. We can live with that, right? And so on.
Emil, let's try to wrap.
Let's just move on. So there's that. And which just leads to maybe to the last one. We would just say that once you start changing your mapping, we would say that for the header, for example, for header details, we would simply recommend ignore the whole mapping, the whole. See, now I have the main flow here. Ignore the whole envelope mapping, because standard TPM will populate it for you automatically. So again, you basically, it's, if you want to follow standard TPM, if you want to the standard functionality over here now, just don't map the envelope anymore. That is all being handled by TPM. So
you go back? Yeah, I think let's just stop here. We have 2 minutes left.
Yeah. So again, that's it. And then you're finished with the migration, and you can now run, you have the first one ready to go, where now you have to work on the connectivity, of course, to partner. Yes, back to the presentation then.
I think we do not have too much left in it. I guess the only thing is, yeah, we are working as we've talked about transport, trying to see how we can work easier with the migration. And then there's a number of manual steps that's kind of irritating. Want to avoid trying to improve all of these things. Yes. Next. I guess this is the main point. So obviously, Emil was really fast in a lot of these places, and I don't think it's really important that you have a good way to handle this. There was some conversation and chats also about Michael, would you put the link in about AS2 and how do you set all of these things up? Obviously, it is important. It is challenging, but and also when you're doing just a proof of concept, you can also make that work. But if you want to have these things that would actually enable you to scale to thousands of hours, you need this experience, this way of setting up combined with the Figaf tool. And that's why we're creating this workshop that you would be able to sign up for and able to understand how we can work with these functionalities. So I would definitely recommend you go sign up for that if you are interested in how you can simplify your migration. So that's the short point of it. I hope you really enjoyed this. Thanks, Emil. Thanks, Kishore, for this. We do have, well, if you're here and still have some questions that I have or Kishore have not answered, then just hang around and we'll try to work and go through those questions. I sincerely hope you will sign up for and go through this this session and say, okay, this is what's going on. And obviously, you can still also explore the Figaf tool for the migration. We have our migration edition that would enable you to explore these capabilities and see what it goes on. But then the understanding of how you can scale it is really crucial. Thanks. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for attending. Martin, just put in the questions. Anything we forgot, then yeah, please email me or yeah. Thanks.